Welcome everyone. Today, we're diving into an exciting what-if scenario set in the Naruto universe. The story is called What If Naruto, the Fateful Uchiha? By Milexcore. If you're intrigued by this amazing tale, be sure to check out the full story through the link in the description. His name was Jun, but he knew it hadn't always been his first name. It was an absolute but distant and vague fact relegated to the back of his mind. He did not pay much attention to it during the first years of his life. That memory felt like a dream you vaguely remember as soon as you wake up and whose details slip through your fingers the harder you try to recall it. People did not always call him June. He had been someone else and lived somewhere else, in another world. A world where he had grown, lived, experienced life, loved, and lost many things, a world where he had died before waking up here as June. However, everything he perceived in this world was strangely familiar, as if his previous incarnation knew about it. Alas, it was a distant knowledge. Not just because it was vague in his mind, but because everything felt far away. Jun was confused, and rightly so because he was just a baby. It wasn't as if he had opened his eyes after his death and woke up in the body of an adult or even a teenager. He felt like a baby in body and mind. It wasn't like an adult trapped in the body of a baby. When he had learned the language of this world, he suddenly recalled the one from his previous life. He was reminded of another world as he learned about this new one. If Jun had to describe what happened to him, he would use the word reincarnation. It was a concept he did not believe in his previous life. He had not been the religious type. There was no God he had faith in. That being stated, he had thought that humans have souls and that something happens to the soul after death. When he grasped his situation, he did not have a strong reaction to it at first as his mind seemed to be in a slumber. As time passed, and more vague memories about his past life came to him, he was shocked. He was reincarnated in another world completely different from his original one, yet it felt familiar. Jun was confused during the first years of his life. It was challenging for him to sort out what was new and what were echoes of his past life. Though he cried and babbled like all babies, his brain was developing rapidly. It did not happen overnight, the process took time. He was still growing like a typical child, maybe a little faster than the average one. He spoke his first words earlier than most children. He grasped complex concepts much faster than most babies. He was aware of the danger that getting close to something hot poses. He knew to be patient when his food was not ready. When he was 3 years old, his mother told him he would be a big brother. Later, he learned to change his little sister's diapers without protest. Though he complained a bit about her crying, he consistently treated her with care. His parents viewed Jun as an intelligent kid. But it wasn't to the point of abnormality. In this world, the boundary between normal and abnormal was completely different from his previous world. The definition of abnormality was a little looser here. Jun quickly realized this world was a unique one. The architecture was unusual. People wore clothes that appeared strange to him, and they seemed to move as much on the street as on the rooftops. He knew this would not be considered normal in his homeworld as no one had the ability to leap from roof to roof. It wasn't until she turned 4 years old that he looked up and recognized the cliff on which were carved 3 faces she had only seen in some of his dreamlike memories. Seeing the monument caused a strong effect on him as he stimulated his memory. He knew he was living in the world of Naruto. Jun was not overcome with happiness. He was genuinely worried. He had an uneasy feeling about the situation. He felt like he was overlooking something important. But he remembered the things he had read. Naruto, Sasuke, Jiraiya, Kakashi, Kyuubi, he recalled them all. However, the memories seemed distant. They felt imaginary. He sometimes doubted them as they felt like memories from a dream. Jun had a hypothesis. He believed the memories weren't too vivid to protect his mind. Perhaps, it would have been too much for a baby to take in everything so strongly. That would explain why everything seemed so far away, so vague. They were real memories, but did not seem genuine. Jun also realized he did not feel any traumas and strong emotions related to his past life. He possessed the information and knew what happened to him, but lacked the emotional part. He thought it was this way because this new body of his was not the one that experienced his previous life. It was given a new beginning with no shackles from his previous ones. Jun grew up absorbing everything around him like a sponge. He learned and comprehended things quickly. He was also a child who liked his parents. He loved walking down the street with them, opening his eyes wide, trying not to overlook any detail of his current environment. He saw ninjas jumping from building to building or just patrolling the streets. He took notice of the color of the walls, the panels, the trees, the clothes, the roof tiles, and the ground beneath his feet. He listened to the noises as well. The absence of sound that accompanied the ninjas' movements fascinated him. He also liked the hubbub of the market, the sounds of the kids in the park, and the muffled sounds of explosions coming from the forest. He would learn later it was where the ninjas trained. Jun's dad was a ninja. His name was Renzo. He wore the classic Konoha shinobi uniform. Jun learned he was a chunin. His father was tall with broad shoulders and a big looming laugh. He had tousled brown hair tied in a ponytail at the back of his neck, a beard, and a scar on his left cheek. He made Jun jump in his arms to hear him giggle and squeal in delight. Sometimes, he was gone for many days. But he always came back with a present for him. His mother used to be a shinobi, but she retired. Jun believed it was to take care of him and his sister. Her name was Hazuki. She was an attractive woman with black eyes and long ebony hair. She had a gentle smile and was a very patient and tender person. Jun had never seen her angry. She enjoyed reading him stories or telling him tales her own parents told her in the past. Jun's sister was named Izumi. From his perspective, she was just a normal baby who cried a lot. She was an adorable baby and her brother liked her. Jun was happy with his family and his life. He had never known fear and never felt danger. Konoha was his home and he felt safe there. He allowed those feelings to comfort him and did not pay attention to his dreamlike memories. Then one day, while her mother was folding clothes, he saw a familiar symbol on the back of a t-shirt. It was a red and white fan, the type used to fan flames to make them hotter. The word Uchiha echoed in his mind and Jun felt his stomach tighten. "Mom, what is this?" he asked, pointing at the symbol. His mother smoothed the cloth with the palm of her hand, a wistful smile on her lips. "It is my clan symbol, June." "Your clan?" Her mother folded the cloth, then squatted down to be at his level. Jun was 4.5 years old, and he was about to learn some information about her mother. "It is the Uchiha clan. When I got married to your father, I gave up my last name. Before that, I was known as Hazuki Uchiha." Jun blinked. Uchiha. Itachi Uchiha. The massacre of the clan. Those words came to his mind. Jun felt cold and held his breath. But the memories weren't clear. He did not know whether to believe them. "Are Izumi and I also Uchiha?" A strange expression crossed her mom's face, a mixture of regret and pride, or maybe something completely different. She shook her head. Jun felt relieved as his shoulders relaxed. "No, darling. I'm no longer part of the Uchiha clan, so neither are you too. I don't think I'd ever go back." Jun nodded, but his mind was already elsewhere. His distant memories were coming to his mind. He was certain that the Uchiha clan was massacred in the Naruto story. It was one of the key points of the plot. He could not figure out the reason it never came to his mind before. He knew he was living before that tragic event happened. The fact that the Hokuge monument only had 3 faces on it was also a clue. He knew what was coming. At some point in the future, Itachi Uchiha would exterminate the entire Uchiha clan, only leaving one survivor behind. His little brother, Sasuke. After the massacre, there was no other Uchiha left in the village. Jun did not remember a kunoichi from the clan who survived. There was also no information in his memory about half Uchiha named Jun and Izumi who lived afterward. Jun swallowed with difficulty upon the realization he just made. These strange memories prophesied a disaster upon his family. All children must have some sort of education in Konoha. There were a few options for parents to choose from. If a child was not enrolled in any school at the age of 7, the parents would have to prove they provided their offspring with a basic education at home. In most cases, children were sent to the academy to become shinobi. A child could enter the academy at the age of 5, and it was free. Jun was positive his parents would have no objection if he decided against becoming a ninja. However, he did not want to be powerless. His memories from his previous life gave him an advantage, but it meant nothing if he couldn't protect his life or the ones he cared about. When his parents mentioned enrolling him in the academy, Jun asked questions. Though he already made his decision, he wanted to have as much information as he could. He inquired about the things he would learn at the academy, the duration until graduation. "Did you listen to that, Hazuki? Our child is so clever. I'm certain he can apply for early graduation," his father said, proudly. His wife glared at him, then her expression softened, and she turned to Jun. "We will be proud of you regardless of when you graduate. I became genin at 12, like most people. So, no pressure, darling." However, it had been in a peaceful time. Jun was beginning to realize that this wasn't the case right now. There were already signs times were changing. There were more funerals than usual. Many merchants were complaining, and the price of some goods was slowly increasing. There were gloomy expressions and low whispers among some people. Others were talking about border defense, squad movements, and counterattacks. Jun was small, but he was far from being naive. He had lived in his family cocoon without much worry. But now, he was aware of the danger looming upon them because of his mother being an Uchiha. Even though she is not officially part of the clan anymore. Jun had no idea when Itachi would strike. He did not know how long he had before the massacre. He started paying more attention to what was said around, trying to pick up any clues. Entering the academy would grant him access to the rest of the shinobi society. It didn't take Jun very long to deduce that Konoha was in the middle of the Third Great Ninja War. Being in the timeline of Naruto's world wasn't easy for him. There was a lot going on, but his memories weren't being very cooperative. He knew he possessed all the information he needed in his mind, but recalling them proved difficult. He knew it was the reign of the Sandaime Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi. The war had yet to fully start. Jun hoped to graduate after the war. Being a rookie on the battlefield wasn't exactly something he was looking forward to. He was a little over 5 years old when he entered the academy. He looked like any ordinary child, cute and adorable. He had a mole on the left cheekbone, black hair, and black eyes. He blended in the crowd, not wanting to stand out. He was a bit intimidated. Though he was reincarnated, he was still a child. He stood in a corner, staring at other children hoping to recognize some of them. But there were no familiar faces from his memories. No Kakashi, no Gari, no Obito, no Rin. However, when the senseis called names, his memories were jolted when he heard one of them. He recognized the name. It was Shisui Uchiha. He sat 2 rows to his right. Shisui didn't exactly look like most Uchiha with his unkempt hair that looked curly. Jun wanted to doubt his memories, but how many Shisui Uchiha could be alive and around 5 years old during the Third Great Ninja War? There was no doubt about it, it was him. Shisui Uchiha, Itachi's best friend. The one whose death would trigger some unfortunate events. At what age would he die? Jun could only guess. Itachi was 13 years old when he massacred the clan. He was 2 or 3 years younger than Shisui, meaning Itachi was probably 2 or 3 right now. Jun roughly had 10 years before the Uchiha massacre if everything went according to the storyline he remembered. There was about a decade left to figure something out. A way to cut himself from the Uchiha clan and hide his existence and his sister from Danzo and others with sharing and fetishism. Jun relaxed a bit more. To a child, 10 years sounded like an eternity. He devoted himself to the academy life but quickly got bored of it. The classes were created for children. There were basic subjects like math, reading, and writing. There were also other activities such as kunai and shuriken throwing exercises, kata's practices, endurance tests, and expeditions in the forest. Jun quickly realized the children were able to keep up because they had naturally learned to use their chakra to some extent. They utilized it to increase their stamina and strengthen their muscles. Some were naturally gifted. Others struggled more. It was often the case with the children of civilians who did not learn about chakra at home. Jun performed well during the physical exercises. He demonstrated a better awareness of his chakra than the other kids. Since he knew what it felt like not having any due to his previous life, he couldn't help noticing the strange power in him. It had been his first clue he was reincarnated into another world. He had sensed the energy inside him when he was a baby. He had felt the warmth of it flowing throughout his body. The sensation was weird at first, but he got used to it. He naturally picked up on how to circulate the chakra in him. He could focus the energy on his hands and feet. He wanted the academy to teach him more. Chakra was used to create jutsus, and that interested him. However, they did not teach them much. Jun could read and write perfectly. He was ahead of the other kids. His learning pace was way above theirs. But the teachers did not notice it right away. The children of civilians and those who do not belong to a clan were given less attention. 2 Noros, for Uchihas, and 2 Hyugas advanced to the upper classes when the senseis realized they already knew how to read and write. Only then did the instructors devote more attention to the rest of the class. Another student claimed to be advanced, and after a thorough evaluation, they moved him to the next level. Jun, on the other hand, did not step forward. He knew the advanced students had a chance of graduating early. It was something he wanted to avoid. He did not want to draw too much attention to himself. Being a genius may be nice, but he knew many geniuses did not get to live long in this world. Time passed. Jun celebrated his 6th birthday at home with his mother and sister. His father was on a mission. He was worried he might not return. But his dad always came back, and this time was no exception. Jun forced himself to believe his father Renzo would survive the war. Shortly after his birthday, Jun started feeling frustrated. He complained to his parents about how boring the academy was to him. He showed less and less interest in the classes. He couldn't explain it, he just felt like he did not belong. They were taught some katas, but Jun did not bother to memorize them. His mom offered to get him some books. She knew her son loved books. The family went to the Konoha library. Jun was fascinated by the place. There were several floors with books. But the rules were strict. Without a ninja headband, you could only access the first 2 floors. But that was enough for the excited Jun. There were numerous stories about the founding of the village, the various clans, the tailed beasts, the previous wars. There were dissertations on psychology, anatomy, and botany. The library also possessed several manuals on exercises to increase one's flexibility and endurance. There were even some rare books on chakra, what it was, how to use it. Flipping through one of the books, Jun found out about the leaf on the forehead test. He was familiar with it from his memories. But he learned more in the book. It was a training method performed by placing a leaf over one's head and focusing their chakra onto the leaf. It taught how to control chakra more effectively and even increase one's concentration. Jun left the library with a stack of books almost as tall as he was. At the academy, it was frequent to see Jun reading a book whenever he was bored. No sensei reprimanded him. He wasn't disturbing the class, so they let it go. Reading was also an activity they encouraged the kids to do. But Jun's personality did not make it easy for him to make friends. He had no enemies and was not an outcast, but he wasn't close to anyone either. He got along well enough with the other kids to be put on a team when they were playing. No one was reluctant to include him in a ninja game or eat lunch next to him. He was branded as the boy who reads all the time. It did not bother him, but he did feel lonely at times. It was different at home, though. He had his family. His father went on missions more frequently. He often came back tired and sometimes sad. But he came back. That was important to Jun. His mom was always present, patient, and caring. Izumi was still small, she was 3 years old now. He couldn't really talk with her. She was still a little kid in his eyes. But she loved him. She loved being with him. Jun also cherished his sister. He wanted to protect her. He knew she wasn't a leading figure in the story of Naruto. However, to him, she was his little sister. She was irreplaceable. Little by little, he understood Itachi's attachment to Sasuke. But it was only that. He did not comprehend how Itachi can kill his own clan. Even though Izumi was important to him, Jun adored his parents even more. He felt like he would never be able to do what Itachi did. Though Itachi desired peace, he demonstrated a decisive and cold side of him that frightened Jun a bit. He felt like Itachi's decision to kill his clan was rash and impulsive. Life in Konoha went on. The Third Great Ninja War was now raging and did not seem to be over soon. But the village itself was protected from it. There was no battle in Konoha. The children were sheltered from it. Even Jun, who knew what kind of horrors lurked in the village, could not help but feel safe inside. He also felt at home. He was never afraid to walk outside on his own. He went to the academy and library by himself. He had begun practicing infusing his chakra even though he had yet to learn a jutsu. He ventured farther from the academy and his house. He explored more of the village. During the holidays, he sometimes spent the day with the other children in his class, playing ninjas or hide and seek. He got lost countless times. That allowed him to discover many interesting places. He also encountered familiar faces such as Minato. Jun had no concrete plan for the future. He certainly did not want to deal with Toby or other antagonists. He wanted to become a strong ninja capable of protecting his family. Obito and his teammates weren't the only faces he encountered. He saw Gari Maito a few times while going to the academy. Jun also saw Shikaku Noro in the street with a tall blonde man he identified as Inoichi Yamanoka. He also saw Kushina in her Jonin uniform passing by him. It was strange for Jun to see all these characters who were now people in flesh and blood. Jun kept his secret to himself. He lived his life quietly, devouring all the books he can. Time passed and the end of the year arrived. At the academy, the kids must take the end-of-the-year test to go to the next level. There was also the option of taking the final exam to graduate and become a genin. Jun wasn't interested in graduating now. His taijutsu was weak, and he had not mastered any ninjutsu yet. Some ambitious kids in her class tried to graduate early, but they all failed. In the advanced classes, a few students succeeded in graduating. During wartime, the average age of the graduates was around 9 or 10 years old. But this time, many younger kids became genins. Among them was Shisui Uchiha, the youngest of the promotion. He was 6 years old. Jun crossed paths with him outside the academy. He looked at him pondering on what the young Uchiha must be feeling. Does he think it was worth it? Is he proud of himself? Does he know what war really is? He couldn't ask Shisui such questions. The instructors decided to move Jun to a higher class based on the result of his test, making him skip a year. Jun thought he had held back, but he obviously did not hold back enough. His mom was happy to hear the news. Am I going to become a genin now? Jun asked with a hint of worry. The sensei laughed and shook his head. No, you're not there yet. Your reading and writing as well as your math skills are strong. You will be wasting your time in the second year. It's best to have you in the third year. You will be behind in taijutsu and chakra-related exercises, but it's nothing you can't improve with practice. It's perfect. His mom answered. The matter was settled like that. No one asked for his opinion. Jun took a step closer to becoming a genin as well as the risks associated with it. The one he dreaded the most was being sent to the battlefield. Time passed, and the new school year started. Jun was nervous. His family, on the other hand, was happy. His father showed him a simple right-hand jutsu and promised to teach him when he was ready. His mother was encouraging him to practice his katas every morning with her. As for Izumi, she was in awe of her big brother. Jun didn't have the heart to tell them he did not want to become a genin, that his dream wasn't to become a ninja. It was just a means to an end. He just wanted to be powerful. This year, there were two names Jun recognized: Yugao Uzuki and Iruka Umino. He wanted to befriend them. He approached Iruka when he was alone and introduced himself. It took more courage to talk to Yugao as she was with a group of kids playing. Jun asked if Iruka and he could join them. Most of them quickly accepted. A few were reluctant to let Jun join them as he was the shortest due to his young age. But he quickly proved his worth, and they accepted him. He shared his lunch with Iruka and Yugao, and their friendship began there. Jun was delighted. The third-year courses weren't much more complicated than the first-year ones he experienced last year. They were more practical. The kids were told about the danger of different environments, edible fruits and mushrooms, safety rules when setting up a camp, and other survival tips. They learned the history of Konoha and its clan, the Land of Fire, their allies and enemies. Jun was ahead of most kids when it comes to history, geography, and math. The class was very selective. Jun was one of the good students, like Yugao and Iruka. The three sat together. For any exercises that require a team of three, they would do it together. They learned more taijutsu. Jun's level was average at best, like Iruka's. Yugao was the one who carried the team. She was better than the both of them in taijutsu. They also learned more about jutsus. They were introduced to ninjutsu. They learned genjutsu and how to break out of one. Not all students performed equally. Those who were immersed in this sort of thing from an early age had no issue keeping up. The others had more difficulty understanding the concept. Everyone progressed at a different pace. Jun, Iruka, and Yugao had all been raised by shinobis but were not part of a clan. They had no issue following the lessons, but they did not get the attention the teachers gave the students coming from clans. Fortunately, it did not hinder their progression. Iruka had trouble with some concepts from time to time, but Jun and Yugao came to his aid. They worked well as a unit. The three spent more and more time playing together. Jun kept up with his reading. He had learned many things about the Uchiha and their dojutsu. He even came across several mentions of Madara Uchiha and his brother Izuna and their Sharingan. There were rare mentions of the Mangekyo Sharingan. The Uchihas were very secretive about it. The little information known about it was from people who had fought against Mangekyo Sharingan users. Jun also learned from books about chakra nature transformation. He also worked on using his chakra efficiently. He possessed a decent reserve of energy for a kid. But compared to an adult, he lacked power. He wanted to compensate for it with better control. The senseis were now introducing them to the idea of feeling chakra and circulating it, using a leaf on their forehead. Jun had already mastered the exercise. He experienced no issue keeping up. After that came walking on trees, walls, and water. The academy was preparing them to be shinobis. A significant part of it is to be able to take a life. They needed to get mentally ready for it. There were survival exercises in the forest during which you had to catch, kill, and prepare your food. Initially, they would just capture it, and one of the senseis would demonstrate how to kill and prepare the animal. After several survival exercises, they had to kill their own prey. There was still a step from slaying a wild animal and killing an enemy on a battlefield. Jun did not know if the other kids were aware of that. Jun, what are you thinking about? Play with me. He turned his head towards Izumi, whose eyes were shining with curiosity. He closed his book on the strengths and weaknesses of the various elements. Nothing in particular. Do you want to train with me? Izumi was delighted. Training his little sister was something he had been doing recently. Before the age of 4, children rarely possessed enough coordination to practice martial arts or even throw shuriken. Jun hadn't wanted to take any risks. He was not well trained either. But he felt confident practicing basic katas with his sister. Jun was presently 7 years old. Their mother did not instruct them in ninjutsu, and their father did not have the time to do so. Perhaps they had hoped to shelter them from reality as long as possible. But when Jun started training his little sister, their parents realized that it was too late to pretend that their babies weren't becoming ninjas. They didn't ask them to stop, but their mom started to assist him with his taijutsu. His father offered him guidance with his chakra control. When Jun demonstrated that he could easily climb trees and walls, Renzo took his son to a pond to practice walking on water. Jun had to adjust his schedule. Its reading time was reduced. He did not have time to read after class anymore. He also spent less time playing with his friends after the academy. His friends noticed he was using the time to train more. They also picked up the pace. Yugo also trained with her parents. As for Iruka, both his parents devoted their time going from battlefield to battlefield. He mostly trained on his own. The extra training paid off. Jun's taijutsu considerably improved. He slowly rose in the rankings. Progressing was more difficult when you faced skilled opponents. Achieving first place seemed impossible. The battle for that spot was between Aizuiga and Fujitaro Uchiha. The two dominated everyone else. Jun was satisfied with his progression, though. He was catching up to Yugo. The instructors began teaching them the basic hand seals to perform jutsus. Jun was good at it. His speed was also decent. His dexterity was so good he could make a card, a coin or a shuriken appear and disappear between his fingers. Even Yuga could not do that yet. Jun's parents finally met his two friends. He was surprised to learn his father knew Yugao's parents. "You're Inoue and Kitaruzuki's daughter? I did a few missions with them. Your father is the best swordsman I know. You must be very talented too. Tell them Renzo says hello." Jun's father said to Yugo outside the academy. She smiled at the compliment. "Is your dad that strong?" Jun whispered to her. She nodded. "He's one of the best kenjutsu experts in Konoha. He teaches me at home." "How come you never use it at the academy?" Iruka asked. "We're not allowed to bring weapons other than kunais and shurikens. If I could use my sword, I would have beat up Aiz and Fujitaro a long time ago." Jun and Iruka nodded with a sneer. Aiz and Fujitaro had similar personalities. They were arrogant, rigid, and extremely proud of their clans. They also despised each other and always competed for first place. Yugao was the only person Jun knew who would use a sword. Everyone else seemed to favor kunais and shurikens. The reason was simple. They were easy to conceal and carry. It was also convenient to carry a lot of them. Kenjutsu users were also prime targets on the battlefield. Jun learned it from the books he read. When someone appeared on the battlefield with a sword, they often became the #1 target. A kenjutsu user's methods of attack were extremely lethal. They could cut down many enemies in an instant. And books on kenjutsu are sinister. Jun thought, putting the book he was reading away. Swords and sabers had their appeal, but it wasn't for him. His father was an expert in ninjutsu. When Jun proved he had enough chakra and control, Renzo promised to train him in ninjutsu. He left the taijutsu to his mother. He confessed to Jun she was more gifted than him in that area. The teenager wasn't going to complain. He would learn ninjutsu. There was something exhilarating about being able to create a fireball or a gust of wind. At the end of the year, Jun finished 6th in his class. The final test was not difficult. There was a taijutsu, genjutsu, and a ninjutsu test that covered the 3 basic jutsus. There was also a written test about history and strategy. The war was still going on. Jun had heard the nickname Konoha's Yellow Flash in the streets. Minato Namikaze was already on the front line. Jun felt bad for the ninja's enemy who would cross his path. He wanted to learn more about the war, but the information was rare. The Third Great War had begun shortly after the Sandaime Keiskage disappeared. Jun had not been born yet. Without its Koge, Suna had become vulnerable and had attracted the greed of neighboring countries. Other nations had also taken advantage of the growing tension to sow discord or attack their neighbors before accusing a rival of their act. Kumo and Kiri adopted that strategy. It was difficult to determine when the war had started. After a while, these tensions and skirmishes had degenerated into huge-scale battles without anyone knowing who truly initiated it. The war was turning in Konoha's favor. According to the rumors, the Sandaime Reikage was dead. His son was the likely successor. Therefore, Kumo was starting to shift his strategy from offense to defense. Kiri and Suna were pretty much defeated. The only ones continuing to fight were Konoha and Iwa. That year, the students of the academy who were 9 and 10 years old progressed into the upper class instead of being sent to war. The graduation age was increasing. It was a good sign. Peace was near. Everyone was tense, exhausted, grieving, and angry. But the war was nearing its conclusion. For many, it was a relief. For Jun, it also meant his father would be home more often. Renzo hadn't forgotten the promise he made to his son. After the school year ended, he took Jun to a vacant training ground to teach him his first jutsu. Logic and prudence would have him start with something simple like the 3 basic jutsus of the academy. The Henge no Jutsu, also known as the transformation technique, allows the user to disguise as another person, animal, plant, or inanimate object. The Bunshin no Jutsu, or clone technique, let the ninja create one or more afterimages of his/her person. The Kawarimi no Jutsu or body replacement technique switches the user with an object to avoid an attack or escape a dangerous situation. Renzo wasn't planning on dwelling on those techniques. The academy already took care of that. He handed a small piece of paper to Jun. It's made to react to chakra. It will let us know your elemental affinity. You just need to infuse your chakra into it. I will demonstrate. His father took out another paper. He circulated his chakra into it, and the paper wrinkled. I possess an affinity toward Raitan, the lightning element. That is why the paper wrinkled. With a Kaiten or the fire element, the paper will ignite and turn to ash. The Futon or wind element split the paper in 2. The Doton or earth element turns the paper into dirt before crumbling away. The Suetun or water element makes the paper wet. So we're here to determine my affinity. Yes. You have a 50% chance of having the same affinity as your parents. My affinity is Raitan, Suetun, and Doton, in that order. So unless you come across the Futon, your mother and I should be able to teach you some jutsus. Don't jinx it. Jun thought. To his knowledge, the Futon was extremely rare in Konoha. Only a few shinobis were known to use the wind element. He knew of Asuma Sarutobi, Orochimaru, and later Naruto Uzumaki. Asking Orochimaru for ninjutsu lessons was out of the question. Jun looked at the piece of paper in his hand and infused his chakra into it. There was a brief noise, and the paper wrinkled. A Raitan affinity like me. That's excellent. Renzo said enthusiastically. What would be a good one to start with? Oh, I got it. The electric discharge. His father offered. The electric discharge was a basic Raitan jutsu that acted like a taser. The user charged the electric energy in his hand, aimed it at the target, and let the lightning escape. It was a C-rank Raitan jutsu that was more about sending out a warning blast than a killing technique. But it had potential. It could be improved to a higher rank technique. Jun trained all afternoon with his dad. It merely took him a few hours to master the jutsu. His clothes suffered quite a bit, and his hair was all over the place from the lightning. His father continued to instruct him. Renzo decided to teach him D-rank and E-rank jutsus. Jun was a bit disappointed. E-rank's techniques couldn't sometimes be qualified as true ninjutsu. D-rank techniques were simple jutsus. They were usually something basic. Renzo showed him a technique to manipulate shurikens, to increase their range and power. It was performed by using chakra threads to control them. Another jutsu he learned was a sensory one, allowing him to increase his own sensory abilities to sense chakra around him. Jun found it very useful. The last jutsu his dad taught him that day was the Shunshin no jutsu, also called the body flicker technique. It was a high-speed movement jutsu. Jun was excited about that technique. He had trouble mastering it, but that was fine. He didn't mind. He had no pressure from a clan weighing on his shoulders asking for immediate success. He also was not a prodigy. The one who would become famous for his Shunshin was Shisui Uchiha. Before school started again, Jun's mother had made an announcement during dinner one night. "I saw my parents." Renzo stopped eating. He seemed guarded. "They are sorry. With the war, we lost so many people. My cousins, uncles, aunts, my little sister, my big brother. They didn't even know I was still alive. They asked me to come back. With the condition that you never see me again? Your dad wanted to have a go at me the last time we saw each other," Renzo said. Jun leaned forward in curiosity. His parents had never spoken of their meeting and disappointment with their respective families. He was aware his paternal grandparents died before he was born. But on his mom's side, he knew very little. "They still have a hard time with me breaking off my engagement and running away with a clanless Chunin. And a stranger. My grandparents were merchants from the land of whirlpools. My mother was not even born in Konoha but in Uzushio." Jun didn't know any of it. But he was familiar with Uzushio. It was the village the Uzumaki came from. "It's true. They haven't forgotten it, and they don't understand my choice. But they aren't angry with me anymore. They would like to meet the children if it's fine with you." Jun immediately thought of the massacre of the Uchiha clan. He wanted to survive Itachi's killing spree by staying as far as possible from the clan. Meeting his Uchiha grandparents wasn't something he was thrilled about. Renzo bit his lips. He looked like he wanted to reject the idea, but he didn't have the heart to deny his wife the chance to reconnect with her family. Jun could sense his father's hesitation. "If they don't like Dad, I don't want to meet them," he said. "Darling, they're your grandparents," his mom replied. "If they don't like Dad, I don't want to meet them. Right, Izumi? Our dad is the best," he said. "I agree with Big Brother. Dad is the best," she added. Jun knew she didn't understand most of what was going on, but he did not care. He was pleased to have his little sister supporting his decision. Jun crossed his arms, trying to look as imposing as possible, and did not avert his mother's gaze. He was set on not giving in on the matter. His mom stared at him for a long moment before sighing deeply. There briefly was, however, an amused look in her eyes. "I will tell them they need to overcome their differences with your father before they can meet you. Is that reasonable?" she asked. Jun wanted to answer no. He had no desire whatsoever to be affiliated with the Uchiha clan. He pretended to think about it for a few seconds before nodding his head. He was betting on the rigidity of his grandparents. He believed they wouldn't change their minds about his father anytime soon. Jun felt like he should have resisted the idea with more fervor. Though Hazuki didn't take them to meet her parents, it was clear to everyone she was seeing them regularly. The number of t-shirts in the kids' closet began multiplying. The color varied. Jun preferred red while Izumi liked purple. There were also a number of black and dark blue t-shirts, the colors habitually worn by most Uchihas. A few of the t-shirts were even embroidered with the red and white fan, the emblem of the clan. That was too much for Jun. He categorically refused to wear the clothes. But Izumi was smaller, more naive, and did not possess his knowledge about the Uchiha's future. She wore the clothes. Jun was extremely reluctant to get closer to the Uchiha clan. His mom then focused on Izumi. When Jun was playing with Iruka and Yugao, his mother and little sister would go on a walk. Izumi soon joined in the games of the Uchiha children who gathered at the park they would go to. The fact that she wore the same clothing and sometimes with the clan symbol allowed her to easily fit in and make friends. Jun was upset. He knew what his mother was doing. His sister was kinder and easier to manipulate. Their mom was hoping Izumi's enthusiasm would draw her brother in. She had no idea who she was up against. Time passed, and the war finally ended. It was sudden. Jun hadn't heard of the Canopy Bridge mission, but he knew it had happened. He also knew there was a decisive battle where Minato slaughtered alone a whole army of enemy shinobi using his Hiraishin no Jutsu. Konoha emerged victorious from the war, but at what price? So many lives were forfeited. No one had the heart to celebrate such a triumph. There were award ceremonies and also memorial ceremonies for all shinobis reported missing on duty. The war was over, and everyone was tired of fighting. The beginning of the school year was approaching. Hazuki mentioned the possibility of not enrolling Izumi this year. Now that peace had returned, children can enroll later. There wasn't a need to quickly make genins to be sent to the battlefields. Parents wanted to spend more time with their children. His mom mentioned a daycare system the girl could go to. Jun was suspicious of it. He believed it was likely an Uchiha daycare and that his grandparents had secured his sister a spot. Jun did not have to protest as Izumi really wanted to go to the academy. No matter what their mom said, she did not budge. Ultimately, they could only respect her desire and enroll her in the academy. She was 5 years old. There were almost no children belonging to a clan in Izumi's class. Most of them were orphans or civilians' children who could not afford child care. Izumi was enjoying it. She was thrilled to start her journey to become a ninja, like her big brother. Thanks to the training she had received at home, she was first in her class. Jun was equally happy to be back at the academy. It was pleasant to see his classmates and his friends. Shortly after the school year started, Minato was chosen to be the Yondaime Hokage. The news ruined Jun's mood. It was because of his memories. Minato Namikaze was going to die. And it would happen soon. It was one of the most important events in the story. The death of the Yondaime also marked the birth of Naruto Uzumaki, the next Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails. Jun was scared thinking about the tailed beast. There would be an attack on Konoha in the immediate future. He cursed himself and his memories. He had been so obsessed with the Uchiha massacre all this time that he had forgotten about other dangers. Itachi was just one person, Danzo was also one man. He could keep himself out of their radar. But Kyuubi? That was another story. It was controlled by Obito. Jun did not know how to protect himself and his family against that. Kyuubi could appear anywhere. Which places would be safe? Which ones would not be safe? He had no idea. He knew for sure that Kyuubi's assault on Konoha instigated by Obito would happen on October 10th of next year. Most kids finished the academy in 4 years. However, there were exceptions. The gifted ones could graduate early. There were also a few who had a mentor already picked for them. Anko Mitarashi was an example of that. She entered Orochimaru's tutelage at a young age. Speaking of the Sannin, he hadn't deserted the village yet. Jun was wondering when he would run away. Well, that was a question for another day. There was a more pressing matter on the horizon, Kyuubi's attack on Konoha. Jun didn't even know how to approach the problem. If he was a genin, maybe he could have tried to approach Kushina, pretending to learn Fuinjutsu from her. He wouldn't need to act too much as he was interested in Fuinjutsu. It would have been an opportunity to get close to the Uzumaki. He could suggest to Kushina to give birth somewhere else other than Konoha. With Minato's help, she could be sent to Mount Myaboku to deliver her baby. Obito would definitely have a hard time tracking them there. However, Jun wasn't a genin. Nothing prevented him to seek out either Minato or Kushina, but academy students were not allowed to find senseis before they graduate. If he did that, people would get suspicious, and he might attract unnecessary attention to himself. Minato was the Hokage. He couldn't casually approach him or his family. Jun was in his 3rd year at the academy. He would have to wait at least another year before graduating. Even if he could graduate early, how can he convince Minato and Kushina? He was only a kid after all. He wasn't supposed to know that Kushina was the Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails. He may end up putting himself in a complicated situation. How can he protect his family? Jun would have liked to save everyone, the Yondaime, Kushina, and all the victims of the tailed beast. But he couldn't. He wasn't physically able to do so. He was selfish to think about only protecting his family. He felt like he had no choice. He would be sad and would mourn the people killed in the attack. He was terrified and felt sick when he thought about it. Jun didn't know how to warn his family of the impending assault without appearing crazy or suspicious. How can he get his loved ones to safety without warning them? Konoha possessed safe houses for civilians to go to during an emergency. His parents' house was far from them. He thought about moving to the Uchiha zone but promptly dismissed the idea. He felt like it was a riskier move. Knowing the date gave him an advantage. He could suggest an outing to his family on that day to get them out of the village. But would it work? He had no perfect solution. In his memories of Naruto, there was no mention of his family. Were they killed by Kyuubi? Was their death inevitable? Was he powerless against it? Jun couldn't inform anyone about the upcoming attack either. His previous life and memories were his greatest secret. Moreover, who would believe him? There was also the possibility of him changing the storyline. His memories would become useless then. Jun was overwhelmed by the situation. He pushed his worries to the back of his mind. There wasn't much he could do now anyway. Fortunately, there were other things to keep him occupied. He would have gone mad if he solely thought about the impending calamity. He had his friends, his family, the academy, and his training. His parents did not train him often, just once or twice a week. It was enough for June days turn to weeks and weeks to months. Jun got stronger. His taijutsu could compete with Yugao's now. Classes were getting more difficult. They focused a lot on taijutsu. The instructors created many activities to increase their physical toughness. Taijutsu matches became more frequent. Iruka's grades dropped as hand-to-hand combat wasn't his strongest suit. In contrast, Jun and Yugao were performing well. They often found themselves facing the top two students, Ai's Hyuga and Fujitaro Uchiha. They were tough opponents to defeat. Their taijutsu was more refined. Ai's used the Hyuga's gentle fist. Fujitaro's style was also strong. He was the only one who could give the Hyuga a run for his money. Jun was surprised to see he was able to keep up with Fujitaro. He understood why with time. They had a similar taijutsu style. Jun concluded his mother taught him the Uchiha taijutsu. Jun wasn't angry. If learning Uchiha's techniques allowed him to get stronger, he would gladly learn. He had no intention of joining a clan that rejected his father though. One day, he asked Renzo a question that had been in his mind for a while. Why don't Mom's parents like you? Is it because your parents were outsiders? His father, who was showing him a Suetun Jutsu, dispelled the technique. It was the hiding in mist jutsu, a low-rank technique Jun was interested in. It's complicated, Renzo said. Are you saying I won't be able to understand? His father shook his head and ruffled his son's hair. You can understand. But it's not simple, I want you to keep that in mind. Jun nodded. He knew his father would tell him the truth. He never lied to him. Jun loved his mother and adored his little sister, but he was closer to his dad. My grandparents were civilians. They were merchants. They traveled with a caravan to many places, the east of the continent, the land of fire, the land of whirlpools, and sometimes the land of water. Ninjas often escorted them. Sometimes ninjas from Konoha, but other times ninjas from Uzushio, the hidden village that once existed in the land of whirlpools. They traveled all the time. My mother was born in Uzushio. My father was born a few months later on the border of the land of fire. They weren't born in Konoha, and they both grew up on the road. But they became Konoha shinobis, Jun said. His father nodded. Conflicts escalated during their childhood and eventually the routes the caravan took became unsafe. It was the Second Great Ninja War. My two grandfathers stayed with the caravan to run the business, but my grandmothers settled in Konoha with their children. Some of their associates moved to Konoha as well. Others preferred cities without ninjas, and a few returned to Uzushio. Renzo looked lost in thought for a moment, then he shook his head and continued. My parents became ninjas, not merchants, and Konoha became their home. I think they did a few missions in the land of whirlpools. They had friends in Uzushio. It was an allied village, that was acceptable. But no one has ever forgotten the fact that they came from another land. Later, Uzushio was destroyed by Kiri, and my parents were very bitter about it. They had lost loved ones. They thought Konoha should have helped them. I was 8 years old at the time, and I remember their anger. But it gave them the reputation of loving another village more than Konoha. During a time of war, it wasn't a good reputation to have. But they didn't do anything wrong. I know. It wasn't fair, but a bad reputation can start from very little. He sighed deeply, then gave Jun a little smile. That's in the past. My parents both died on a mission 3 years later, just before I graduated. People seem to forget about my origins. Then, I met your mother. We were assigned to the same team as Genins. When we fell in love, the Uchihas suddenly remembered that my parents had been accused of loving Uzushio more than Konoha. They brought it out in the open and caused a scandal. I was furious. Renzo gritted his teeth, then seemed to collect himself before continuing in a calmer tone. I don't know if they were really that opposed to the idea of their daughter marrying a son of foreigners, or if it was just a pretext. Either way, they crossed the line. They used their influence to separate our team. They made sure we were never assigned to the same missions. Then, they arranged an engagement for your mom with a member of the clan without telling her. Jun was shocked. After a while, your mother packed up her things and told them she's had enough. She disappeared from their lives, and they let us be. Maybe it was because of the war. Kumo had joined in. Suna found a new Kazekage, and Konoha officially declared war. Things were chaotic. They may not have had time to look for her. There was a brief silence. Jun was digesting the information. Konoha may enjoy an enviable reputation among the villages, but the way it sometimes treated its shinobi was far from being exemplary. You never talk about it. His father shrugged, he was a bit uncomfortable. There is not much to say. It happened long before you were born. Jun wrinkled his nose, unconvinced. What were their names? Your dad and mom, my grandparents. Renzo gave him a surprised look, then looked away and rubbed the back of his neck. He was visibly embarrassed. My mother was Makino and my father was June. You were named after him. Jun's eyes went wide in surprise. He never knew and never wondered where his name came from. For a moment, he tried to imagine his unknown grandfather and how he had suffered from the way his comrades treated him. He promised himself to honor the name. Jun and his father didn't bring up the subject of his grandparents anymore. He could tell it was still a sensitive topic. Moreover, he had obtained the answers he sought. Jun told Izumi a little about it. He thought she deserved to know. There were half-Uchiha and descendants of people from Uzushio. That was a unique combination. Jun didn't tell his friends Iruka and Yugao the whole story. He merely mentioned that his grandparents came from the same village as Kushina Uzumaki. He also began to read books about the land of whirlpools, its history, geography, ninjas, and its fall. The books about the topics were rare. It was something Konoha wasn't proud of. They weren't too excited to put what happened in history books. Jun was frustrated. He felt like the Uzushio people deserved more. He knew Konoha shinobis had the Uzushio symbol on the back of their uniform, but was that enough? Jun asked to learn the basics of fuinjutsu for his birthday. His parents weren't acquainted with anyone with expertise in the field. Therefore, they bought him several books not available in the library. Judging by the sharp look Hazuki had given Renzo when Jun made the request, and his father's smug smile, he knew they had guessed where this new interest sprouted from. Hazuki was pushing the kids towards the Uchihas, and Jun couldn't discourage her. However, he wasn't going to ignore the other half of his heritage. He loved his father and was proud of his origins. It didn't matter what the Uchihas thought. Fuinjutsu was complex. Jun understood why only a selected few mastered it. On the other hand, it was also fun. There were many applications with Fuinjutsu, storing weapons, chakra, or even jutsus. You could create dimensional spaces and barriers. But that was currently out of his reach. A basic application of Fuinjutsu was explosive tags. There were sheets of paper inscribed with a specific seal. When chakra is infused into it, the papers will explode after a period of time. They could be detonated remotely or by being ignited with fire. Moreover, they started learning to use those tags at the academy. Jun wanted to master how to produce them. It was a common ninja tool after all. His two friends thought it was a brilliant idea. Therefore, he involved them in the process. He shared his books and the knowledge he had acquired. They all grasped the concept quickly. They worked together, supporting each other. Jun wanted to add some variety to the explosive tags. "What do you mean by that?" Iruka asked. "We could put nails, shrapnel, and other sharp objects in it," Yugao suggested. Jun and Iruka both paused and turned to their friend. "What? Isn't it a good idea?" Jun kept the idea in mind and also made a mental note not to underestimate Yugao's mind. "I was thinking more of making the explosion louder or with an intense flash to disorient people. Or maybe smoke tags, with smelly smoke for instance." "All right. But I also want to see if we can make my idea reality." That year, the Academy witnessed numerous explosions while the trio was conducting tests. Inventing the flashbang and stun tags took them half a year. The shrapnel tag was considerably faster to make. It was enough to combine a basic storage seal with the trigger of a standard explosive tag. Easy peasy. There were accidents during the process. Iruka burned his hand several times. Yugao accidentally blinded herself a few times. The explosive trio, which was now their nickname, didn't spend all their time blowing things up. They also worked hard. They started fighting with real weapons. They were taught how to handle a multitude of weapons. Children belonging to a clan were given permission to use their clan jutsus. Ice Hyuga did not hesitate. The full might of the gentle fist was shown. The Noras used their Kagemain no Jutsu or shadow imitation technique. The Yamanokas could possess their opponent. The Aburames called forth their army of insects. The kids with no clan had to work together to put up a fight against them. The end of the school year was imminent. With no war on the horizon, Jun found himself looking forward to becoming a genin. He liked the academy, but he had done his time. He wanted to travel, see new places and meet new people. He still had a realistic view of what being a ninja really meant. He knew he had been trained to be a soldier, a killer, an assassin, a spy. But that life was also full of adventure, power, camaraderie, and an opportunity to affect the world. Jun, Yugao, and Iruka passed their classes. They would start the fourth year the following school year. They were curious to see the new genins of this term, so they went outside to observe the graduates. Jun surprisingly recognized several of them. There were two boys who he was sure would become the eternal Chunins, Kotetsu Hagabe and Izumo Kamizuki. They were among the oldest and must have been 12 years old. There was also a boy wearing his headband like a bandana and had a sword strapped to his back. It was Hayate Gecko. Jun remembered the relationship between Hayate and Yugao in the storyline. But his friend hasn't been acquainted with Hayate yet. Jun wondered how their teams would be formed. Traditionally, 3 genins were placed under the tutelage of a jonin. With the recent war, the village lost many shinobis. Many genins were promoted to chunins and reassigned elsewhere. There were many incomplete teams. Moreover, there was a lack of jonins. The ones available already had students. He wasn't sure how things would be like next year. It will be soon, Yugao said. Maybe we will be on the same team, Iruka added. Not likely, Jun said. Yeah? Why not? I don't think a sensei would want to deal with the explosive trio. Jun joked. They all laughed together. Time passed. Jun continued to educate himself with books. His father went on a mission for several weeks, putting his ninjutsu training on hold. He had no choice but to practice alone. He had already mastered several D and C ranks Raitun and Suitun jutsus. He wanted to learn a B rank technique. He knew it was a dangerous endeavor and didn't dare to try it without supervision. The new school year began. Izumi's class doubled in number with all the clans enrolling their kids. There were 4 little Uchihas in the mix, among them was a little boy named Itachi. Jun almost choked on his tea when Izumi mentioned the name to him. It brought forth the knowledge of the massacre. Itachi was now 6 years old. Jun only had 7 years left to protect himself and his family. It would be a challenging task. His sister wasn't making things easier when she told him he liked the boy. Even though the young Itachi kept to himself and trained all the time, Izumi had fallen for him. Jun hadn't met Itachi yet. So the next few days, he would climb a tree that overlooked the student's yard and observe Itachi. The boy was serious, and he was gifted. He had sensed his presence almost immediately. Iruka and Yugao found it funny. He had to explain why he was observing the young Uchiha. He told them his little sister liked him, so he had to make sure he was a good boy. They found it amusing. More memories came to June. Wasn't there a girl who liked Itachi in the story? If his memories were accurate, her name was Izumi. Jun wondered if it was his little sister. Either way, he refused to let that happen. Jun and Yugao were among the top students in their class. They were having specialized training now. Yugao was receiving kenjutsu lessons. The students were evaluated for sensory abilities. Jun stood out with his ability to sense chakra with great precision. Ise Hyuga and Fujitaro Uchiha continued their rivalry. Yugao taught Jun and Iruka some kenjutsu techniques. Iruka showed them how to set up traps. Jun shared with them a few useful low-rank jutsus. Routine set in. Days turned to weeks, weeks to months. Renzo returned from his mission and resumed training his son. Izumi continued seeing Itachi. Summer came. Jun turned 9 years old. He had 3 months left before the Kyuubi assault on the village. He still had no idea how to save his family. Perhaps he should arrange for them to stay with people he knew for sure survived the ordeal. Yugao and Iruka survived. Maybe they could stay close to them. But Jun wasn't confident things would go exactly like the storyline he knew. People who survived in his memories may die this time. In his despair, he memorized the route to the various shelters. He would escort his family there when the alarm goes off. He was counting on his sensory ability to react fast. As soon as he senses the Ninetales chakra, he would take his family away to one of the shelters. The summer ended. No one was aware of the calamity that was about to strike them. One day, Jun passed Kushina in the street. She was very pregnant. He felt a knot in his throat when he saw her happy smile. He knew her fate. But he said nothing. As they got closer to the day of the attack, Jun got more anxious. He had trouble sleeping. His grades were affected by it. His parents noticed the change and were worried about him. He almost laughed at their face. They were concerned about grades when the most powerful tailed beast was about to go on a rampage in their village. Jun was scared. But he wouldn't panic when the time came. He knew what was coming, he was mentally prepared for it. So he thought. But he was wrong, dead wrong. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this chapter of What If Naruto, the Fateful Uchiha? Jun's journey is far from over, and there's so much more to come. If this video gets enough views, the next part will be on its way soon. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so you don't miss any updates. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Your feedback really matters. See you next time.